We tend to lose sight of what we actually control in life. And then we fixate on these things that we really don't, what I would call the theirs generally.
Yes.
So I think
it's what's mine, what's theirs, and what's God's. What do I control? What do the people around me control? And what does God control? And it's stay in your lane around. Don't try to be God. Don't try to be them, or else you're going to be super stressed. You're not going to get stuff done. You're not going to all of them.
But the average employee thinks in those terms.
Right.
They have given control of their career to
good.
an organization, to a boss.
Yes.
And then now think about why we do that. Because then we have an excuse. It demands nothing of us, and then we're just sitting back waiting on life to happen to us.
All right, y'all. Welcome to Off the Record. We now officially have a title for this. I'm Mark Clark. This is
Kevin Thompson. Where did the y'all come from, by the way? Is that my impact
Did I
on
just
you?
say that?
Oh
my goodness! I'm becoming you.
I think I have you wearing my shirt, and now
I never said y'all until I moved down to California, and I hung out with a couple people from. What did you call yourself? An Arkansanian?
No, an Arkansan.
An Arkansan. Look up, everybody. Google whether that's actually a word, and share it on your YouTube comments, because no one's ever said Arkansan other than the man sitting beside me. So you are from Arkansas.
Yes.
Tell us about that. I mean, this crowd of thousands, hundreds, doesn't know you. So I want to get to know you a little bit. Kevin wrote a great book. We're going to talk about it in a little bit, but I want to get into your life first here. Tell us about yourself. You grew up where?
Yeah, so I grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, which is right in the middle of nowhere. Here's the claim to fame.
What was the population?
Population 100,000.
Okay.
Claim to fame was it's where Elvis got his hair cut whenever he went into the military.
Oh, right. So that was a big deal.
Yeah, no, it was.
I watched the movie, and they were playing that into like, he got a haircut, he's going to the military. Let's use him one way, So
yeah, that was Fort Chaffee, which is right outside of Fort Smith. No, absolutely. So Arkansas. I always thought I grew up in the South, right? Because you think Arkansas is in the South,
Definitely.
And then I went to a grad school in Birmingham, Alabama, and I was like, no, this is actually the South.
That's
so a little bit more Midwest, probably.
Okay.
Blue collar, hardworking, great people.
Yeah.
Love their families, all that kind of stuff.
Love it. Okay, so you grow up there, you're born and raised there, and then what are you going to do with your life? You played some golf.
Yeah, I did. Always grew up playing.
He's a great golfer.
Playing all sorts of sports, no doubt. But grew up in the church, and really, late junior high, started feeling like this call to preach. And so at that point, it was, are you going to go be a lawyer, a politician, a coach? But then this desire to preach kind of came along. So by high school, I already knew what I was going to do and went from that direction. Then went to college in Oklahoma, and graduate school in Alabama.
So, and then you started working in ministry, a church, like, what'd that look like?
Yeah, I started preaching whenever I was high school, and would go around to every little small town that you look back on that. You know what it's like. Not that was your exact experience, but you understand the early days of preaching. You look back and just feel sorry for the people of like they had to actually listen to you.
Oh goodness! I think my first sermon was on Matthew 23, and I was a young, full of stuff and vinegar. I don't know off the record what we can say here, but and I was like the most angry chapter I could find, in the Bible. And she says, "Hey, you whitewashed tombs. You're all full of stuff." And I just yelled at these, kids. And I was sitting there, having a cigarette out back, put it out, get up, open my Bible, yell at them for an hour for being church kids because they had grown up in that and weren't welcoming me into the church. Oh, yeah. So I kind of screamed at them for an hour, but I felt bad about it after because I was like,
I did Colossians 1, the supremacy of Christ.
You remember your first sermon?
So I was preaching about Jesus.
Yes. And I was preaching against the religious spirit. We don't need to look up my first sermon, Jordan. We don't really have to.
That would be excellent.
We got a research assistant here who looks up, makes sure that what we're saying is legitimate. So we're going to track down your Fort Smith.
That sermon that has 7 views. Let's go look at it right now.
That would be a lot. Okay, so you get into preaching, you get into pastoring, and then you end up at this church. So Kevin came to work at Bayside a couple of years ago and doing a great job, family life pastor. But before that was the boss at a church, was the senior pastor, senior leader. Tell us about that church and that experience.
Yeah, great experience. So it was planted by my father in the ministry. So whenever I went off to college, he planted this church there in Fort Smith. So I went to grad school. I'd come back and preach, do all those things. So whenever I was leaving grad school, had these decisions to make. Thought about going to Princeton to get my PhD in preaching. Could have stayed in Alabama. Had a job opportunity in Oklahoma, but then had this opportunity back in Arkansas. Church of 300, come on and be a teaching pastor, with the idea that eventually he and I would switch roles. I would become the lead pastor. He would stay on staff for a while. Chose to do that. Church grew greatly, 300 people to probably 1,200 people when he and I actually switched roles in 2008. And then church grew, and it was just fun, sweet experience. Love it. Pastoring my hometown. My mom lived across the driveway. My old Sunday school teachers were in the church. I mean, just crazy thing to think about, that you're supposed to be the spiritual leader of these people who help grow you up.
Right. Now, one of the things that I think people find interesting is one of the reasons you ended up going. I think God might be calling me away from here, because this show's off the record. So we got to talk about things that are more interesting than right down the pike here. So to tell us the story about little New York Times, little like what you were in a situation.
Oh, we're going here.
Yeah, we're gonna go here. Okay. Yeah, it's off the record, bro. So you were in a situation where politically, I don't know if you guys know this, but politically America was divided during the Trump years, especially in church life. And, conservative churches were very, pro-Trump, and non-conservative churches weren't, and churches were trying to find their identity, and there was all this tumult and craziness going on, and you're pastoring a church in Arkansas at a time like that, and you start to see some of the dangers in some of these idealistic ways, both on the left and the right, and you pastored in the way that you thought God was calling you to, and some stuff started to, bubble up a little. So take us through a bit of that journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whatever you feel safe enough to say. And
off the record.
Yeah. Off the record.
Yeah. So I haven't talked about this publicly other than
the
original interview. And so here we are.
All right.
So, I mean, Mark, I think we share a common idea about what preaching is about. That preaching is not about talking to people outside the room to make people inside the room to feel better.
Right.
That preaching instead is taking this text, first and foremost confronting us, and then confronting those who are in this room, and comforting as well, but confronting, no doubt.
Yeah.
And so that was always my viewpoint of preaching. And so obviously where we were in Fort Smith was as politically conservative as you could possibly be. That was my upbringing. That's who I was as well. But part of the task of that is then to confront those people with areas that maybe their political ideologies don't line up with Scripture. And so that was just always my
easy job.
Clearly.
Yeah.
But and that's what we had always done, and it always worked really well. But something changed.
On both sides of the aisle, of course.
Oh, no question.
Yeah.
No question. And so in 2015, things changed. And I wrote an article on my blog in 2015 about, hey, in 2016, we're coming into a very contentious election. Now, think about what's going on in Arkansas at this time. So you have Trump, who obviously is going to win the state. It's a Republican state. and then he's running against our former First Lady of Arkansas, Clinton. And so she had a good number of friends who were in this community as well. And I just wrote a very basic article in the midst of all the contention that basically said this. Look, however you vote in this scenario, I get it, and I don't blame you. And I'm totally good with that. For me personally, I can't vote for either one because to me, character is a prerequisite to leadership. I don't see it here. So I'm going to vote for somebody else. I don't know who. I'm going to vote for somebody else.
I didn't know.
And so be it.
Right.
Like no big deal.
Right.
And oh my!
So you didn't say this isn't from the pulpit. This is your own personal blog. Yeah. There's side hustle. You're a writer.
Yeah.
You love to do this. Okay.
Personal blog that just what I'm trying to show people is Christians can come to different conclusions about these issues in faith, vote and do things in different ways, and that's totally fine. Sure. And we should still have this deep fellowship with one another, love and affection for each other.
Yeah.
But literally in that moment got blamed for everything possible. Basically it was, if you don't vote for him, you're voting for her. If you don't vote for her, you're voting for him. So I started saying, I'm the most powerful person I've ever met then. But by not voting for either, I'm voting for both. I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing that you think you can pull off now. And it just began a spiral there. Thought the election happened, thought it was over, but then George Floyd happened, and just the race element of what was going on. So the New York Times article eventually came out.
Yes, and what was the New York Times article? It was a journalist that wanted to write an article on that stance that you took, or just talk to people in your church, or what was the New York Times?
So Ruth Graham's the writer, a great writer. She wanted to do an article on how Trumpism was putting pressure on pastors, and I mean, literally. In my opinion, it was not the whole church by any means. It was a small segment of the church. Mm-hmm. The fact that I wasn't willing to bow my knee to Trump, they were done with me. Mm. And it was such a small segment of the church that it wasn't that big of a deal, except they leveraged tremendous power and pressure. Okay. Matter of fact, looking back on it, and even at the time, I almost feel guilt from the standpoint of, because a good number of these people, they weren't active church members. They were Christian by political stance more than faithfulness to Christ. And the fact that I was so moved by that I feel some guilt as far as that goes, because we really shouldn't be driven by people who aren't fully engaged with Christ. Sure. And yet that's where I stood. And then beyond that, there were some great people who, drank the Kool-Aid.
Right.
And
so the New York Times article, we just pulled it up here. As a seismic shift fractures evangelicals, an Arkansas pastor leaves home, and then it has you sitting at a cemetery or something.
That's exactly right.
So what does that title mean? Leaves home. What does that mean? Is that when you decided to come to California?
Yes. So I thought I was going to be there. I'm here to sell my book, Stay in Your Lane. I did not know we were going to talk about this. I came to so the idea was, I thought I was going to pastor there my entire life. I kind of took the as my son Silas said, this book is going to change tens of people's lives.
Yes, that's
true. And so
we will get to that. But I've never had an article about me in my church in New York Times. I mean, it's amazing.
So here's the funny thing about this. And
it wasn't a bashing. It was
no. It was a good art. It was a fair article. Sure. The principle was this, that I thought I was going to live there my entire life and pastor, and these events caused me to look someplace else. Sure. Now I look back in the sovereignty of God and go, you know what? This is the only way God could have moved me, is something like this.
Sure.
But the writer, Ruth Graham, the reporter here, was running to write a story about what's going on inside the evangelical church.
Sure.
Because the perception was, especially to readers of the New York Times, is the whole evangelical church is all behind Trump. And she wanted to show that's not the case. That just as society is divided, so is the evangelical church.
Sure.
And so, I mean, for me, where I was taking so much of my solace was Russell Moore, Beth Moore, Max Lucado, and then I think about especially whenever it comes to issues of race, which is really where the tension was really about race. Not COVID, but much more about race in that moment. And so even among the Black Lives Matter movement, I wrote an article about that just from a theological standpoint. Forget the organization, but just that idea of, obviously the church shouldn't hesitate to say that Black Lives Matter. And you think about, even in John's gospel, the disciple that Jesus loved, right? This narrowed down kind of moment. What I wrote an article that just basically said this: look, you can't talk about the all unless you talk about the each. So if you truly believe that all lives do matter, nobody hesitates whenever I say my daughter with special needs, her life matters. Nobody hesitates at that. Nobody hesitates whenever I talk about what we're doing to police officers, to military, that their lives matter. And yet for some reason, whenever I said Black Lives Matter, apart from the organization, just from a theological concept,
because they were packing in all the other things into whatever that phrase meant for the things that they were reading about. Well, it means this and it means that, right?
No doubt. And I mean, I could stand up, and I would regularly stand up on a Sunday morning and say, look, we all struggle with lust. We all struggle with gluttony. We all struggle with greed. We all have biases. Oh, hang on. With that last one, how dare you call me a racist?
Right.
Well, now wait a second.
Right.
We just listed.
All you would say is we all have biases, and then they would jump that into
some. Right. So, again, I think it's very important because the article, I think the article nationally was read properly. It was this idea of, hey, this is a national story of what's going on. It was happening here in California. It was happening there. talking to somebody recently, and they were talking about what it was like to pastor in Portland at the time. And he said, man, this is exactly what was going on in Portland. I'm like, are you crazy?
Right.
Like Portland and Arkansas have the same experience.
Right.
So nationally, I think the story was read that way. Locally, some people got their feelings hurt because they thought it was a shot I was taking at the individual church, which was not my desire at all.
So let me pivot this very tense, difficult time in your life.
Yeah.
Now, God used it to bring you out to California, and now you're pastoring here. So let's use that then. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it was to use it as a metaphor or a symbol or an example of exactly what this book is about.
Yeah. Yeah, so and how I failed, really, at this book.
Well, think about what this book's about. So here's what you got to understand. So we wanted to, as a church, we have so many great thinkers and writers, and we want to resource the church, we want to resource the worldview thinking. And so we said, what would it be like to launch a publishing arm, a Thrive Publishing, Thrive Media, content, videos, book publishing. And so Kevin wrote the first book of this Thrive Media arm department that we're doing, that we want to resource people. Amazing book. So we said, okay, Kev, write a book. So he took this thesis, Stay in Your Lane is the name of the book. And he took a thesis that he'd been using for 25 years as a pastor. And he took it all. He said, look, I've been shepherding, counseling people through every decision-making scenario in their life using this strategy. And so take this, give us a thesis strategy, but then come back to how did you succeed or fail at this massive decision you made to come here? And then we'll get into what it means for all the viewers.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I don't even remember where it came from, to be honest with you. Just something that kind of,
this idea?
Yeah, that just kind of happened over time, that I would be sitting with somebody, they'd be in my office, we'd be at a restaurant, whatever, and they'd start talking about an issue. And if it were in my office, I'd turn around, take a sheet of paper, and draw 2 lines down it to make 3 columns, and write at the top, what's mine, what's theirs, what's God's. And then I would say, hey, fill this out, and that's going to answer the issue. As you know, Mark, we deal with people in so many different situations, and yet you need a framework by which you're going to assist people. Because in the end, it's not you telling them what to do. There are times in which they want to do something foolish, and we can say very clearly, don't do that. But most of the time, we're dealing with people who are trying to figure out, do I marry this person? Do I break up with this person?
Yes.
Do I buy this business? What is God's will, right?
Yes, exactly.
Am I supposed to move or not?
Yes.
And so you can't tell them what to do, but you want to assist them to understand, how do we go about making this decision?
Yes.
And so it got so popular, actually, that we actually had them printed off and put on the side of my desk, to where if I'd be talking to a couple or to an individual, I could just easily grab it, hand it to them.
You have like 50 stacks
No,
of
it's
that
right
column.
there. And it's just, hey, fill this out. And people look at that, and they're always like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
Right.
I live in this complicated decision that's before me.
Yes.
You think with a napkin you can solve it.
Right.
And I'd be like, trust me.
Yeah.
And then they would start working through that. And it's just amazing to me, because here's what tends to happen. We tend to lose sight of what we actually control in life. And then we fixate on these things that we really don't, what I would call the theirs generally.
Yes.
So I think
it's what's mine, what's theirs, and what's God's.
Yes.
What do I control? What do the people around me control? And what does God control? And it's stay in your lane around. Don't try to be God. Don't try to be them, or else you're going to be super stressed. You're not going to get stuff done. You're not going to all of that. Okay,
yeah. No, absolutely. And even if you look back in the very almost last page of the book, you have this illustration that really lays it out then, of this basic concept of, whenever I ignore what's mine and I try to control what's theirs, and I deny what's God's, I'm going to get stuck, confused, my life is going to be chaotic.
Yes.
But the moment I begin to actually control what is mine,
yes.
So what is it that God has actually given me control over? Now, let's own that fully. And then begin to respect the decision-making processes of other people, that you have a right now to make this decision. Think about this from a career standpoint, right? So you're one of my bosses, right? We have multiple, you're one of them. If we're not very careful, the average employee thinks in these terms: you're in control of my career. And so I'm just sitting back passively going, well, if Mark would care more about marriage ministry, if Mark would give me a national platform, if Mark would leverage all of his stuff.
What we're doing here,
that's
Kev.
yes,
National
that's we are off the
right
record.
now.
I am now being
skyrocketing to number 3 of podcasts called Off the Record.
In front, Minnesota, watch out.
Yeah.
And so, but the average employee thinks in those terms.
Right.
They have given control of their career
Yes, that's
to
good.
an organization, to
Yes.
a boss.
Yes.
And then now think about why we do that. because then we have an excuse. It demands nothing of us, and then we're just sitting back waiting on life to happen to us. But the moment we begin to recognize, you don't own my career. I have chosen to work for you. You have chosen to allow me to work for you. Either one of us could change our mind at any moment, especially depending on how this goes. Since I didn't know you were going to talk about the New York Times, I may not have a job after this, actually. But that's what we've chosen. But I control that aspect of it, and which then empowers me to act. It gives me a sense of agency over what's going on in life. But then there's the what's theirs column. Well, I can influence you through my words, through our relationship, through my model. It's not like I'm helpless regarding what other people have, but I don't control it. And whenever I spend
so
time,
much of life is spent trying to control what other people should or should not do, what other people should and should not think, and it causes mass amounts of anxiety. Right?
That's where the worry really comes in. And here, think about the difference between, I think, what would be worry versus work. So if this is a book about decision making, we shouldn't worry about our decisions, but we should work on our decisions. Proverbs would say it this way, that we should weigh our decisions. So weighing is it's the old symbol of a bank, right? So you would come in with an unknown value of what you hope is gold. And the way they would figure out how much gold that has is they would take scales and they would have these known weights, these tested weights over here. And they would put your unknown quality on one side, they would put the known quantities on the other. And whenever those balance out, you now have a value of this thing that was unknown. So in that you're weighing it. You're actually doing work to figure it out. What does worry do? Worry feels the exact same way. I'm thinking about it, I'm ruminating about it. My body has changed because of it, but it's not taking me anywhere. Worry stays the same day after day after day after day. That's a sign that you're putting mental energy into something you really don't control. And that's where I think a lot of people are.
I want you to show us how you use this to make this decision to come here. I mean, I came down here from Vancouver. I discerned the will of God in my life and had to make a decision. He came down here, and that's a different story for a different day. But you knew this. Did you use this for this decision to come here?
Yes, I used it. In some ways, I used it. In some ways, I ignored it. One way I ignored the book and I paid the price is in leading during COVID race political tensions. I did not control what was mine, my own attitude, my own energy levels, my own sense of identity. That's either mine or God's. We can talk about it either way. What I tended to do was to fixate on what was theirs, and that was other people. And so these people that I love, these people that I pastor, I took on their decisions. I took on their
opinions of you,
their opinions of me.
Well, and we all do that. I mean, that's the human story.
Yeah, but we pay a price for it.
Yeah,
and we know it. And I think that's what's difficult is we know better, but we tend not to do it. And we get so much of our identity from the people that we pastor rather than just loving them well and saying, hey, this is where it falls. But whenever it comes time to actually make this decision about coming here, then it becomes, all right, what's mine? Well, I get, because of the world in which we live, I get to choose where I work, whom I work for, where I live, where my family lives. As long as I can get somebody to hire me, I can go there. And then what's theirs? What are other people going to think about it whenever I move? Are people going to be hurt? Are they going to feel abandoned? You know what? That belongs to them. That's between them and God.
Sure.
And ultimately, God is going to sovereignly, even if I'm making the wrong decision, He's going to use this now for my good, for His glory.
So what did you, just thinking of the people out there that are thinking about decision making in their own life and face decisions like you made, what does God have to do, or what did it look like when you decided to make that move and come here? What part did God play? Did you fast? Did you go to spiritual counselors? Did you read the Bible? Did you work? Like what did it all look like?
No, absolutely. And the idea you're searching out, praying to God. All right, God, first of all, if you don't want some of this to happen, just close doors and I won't have to worry about it. Like, if nobody wants to interview you, you don't have to wonder,
you started looking before
God's
you quit
will?
Though, like formally.
Yeah, I came to a point. Here's what I told Jenny. I said, Jenny, if we could stay here for the rest of our lives, but if we do, there's a chance that this could become a bitter experience. Or we could leave, and by leaving, this will always be a sweet experience. And in my opinion, I think that these people that I'm trying to pastor would benefit from hearing a different voice say the same thing I've been saying.
Yeah.
So, because I mean, that's the funny thing to me. You know what it's like as a pastor. You know, you preach something for 10 years, and somebody comes up to you one day after church and goes, "Man, I heard this Andy Stanley podcast, and he said this most brilliant thing." And you're like, "I stole that from Andy Stanley 10 years ago. I've been telling you that for 10 years, and yet this different voice."
Yes.
And so I look back on what I preached. I look back on what I wrote, and that's the fun thing about a blog is everything I wrote is still out there. You can find it. You can look at it time tested. And what I'm probably proud of is when things pop up in my memories and you read it now and you go, yeah, that stood the test of time, even though as contentious as it was at the moment. This idea that, you know what, I believe character matters in leadership. And for me, looking at biblical leadership, strong character is a prerequisite. And I am not going to sign my name to somebody else who has boasted about sexually assaulting people. No, not going to do it. And have no shame in saying I'm not going to do it. Not going to stand in other people in judgment of how they vote, anything like that. But time has played nicely, I think, in those ways, and that's one of the powerful thing I think about a blog that's out there now. That as Jordan's scrolling through it, I'm a little bit more afraid about what you might come up on.
Let's read the one called "A
way.
Secret About Today," which could change everything about your marriage. So he just pulled up an article that you wrote a couple years ago, or I don't know when it was. If you go back one page, 10 texts that you're supposed to send your spouse.
There we go.
What's that?
Let's scroll up. Let's
Talking
see.
about what's mine and what's hers.
Yeah.
Let's,
So these are way, and look,
can we make that any bigger?
A good advertisement there for Happily,
Oh, boy. Yeah, here
for
we go.
couples who want to love, last,
I
and laugh.
choose you all over again. Oh.
So, here, let's
Have
do
you
this.
ever
Hey,
texted? I'm
can
going
we
to
do
text
this?
Jenny right
No,
now
no.
and see if you've ever texted her the words,
Here's-
I choose you all over again.
I want you. I don't have my phone because it's charging. I want you to grab your phone right now and choose one of these and send it to Erin
send
and
it
see
to
her
Erin.
response.
Thank you for...
Can we do that?
Ooh.
Can you take your
I
phone
wouldn't
right
want
now?
to do that. I wouldn't want to do that. I've got it covered. Should I just do it random?
No. What? Well, you get
Like, does it have
you
to
get
make
one
any
of the 10.
sense to her?
Can
I'm going to... last night was fun.
there we go.
Yeah.
Was it?
Okay. That's a great idea. Would that any
What's
work?
one thing I can do? If you do that one right there.
Oh, I don't know if I want to live up to that.
Hey,
What's one thing I can do for you today?
Yeah.
Shoot. That's
What's
tough
one
to live up to. What if she actually says, I need you to go to the bank. I need
Then-
you to go
then
grocery store."
go.
Bro, I'm tired. I just want to
Good
go home.
golly.
I just want to go home and eat.
All right. How about number 10?
Hold on. Let's go for a walk later. Aw, I don't feel like doing that, though. I'm kidding. Want to meet at home for lunch? I miss you. Oh, that's cute. Let's go up to the top. What was the top one?
Pick one. I like
Let's go to
this.
the top one. I choose you all over again.
See Erin's response.
Choose you all over again. But what if she sends in a sincere response? And that's
Because it
gonna
is sincere. Is it not true?
No one talks like that, though.
What?
No one says that in a text.
Why?
I choose you all over again? What is this?
You wouldn't?
A J-Lo romantic comedy?
Are you taking like marriage tips
No, of
from
course
Jerry
I
Springer?
would.
Like who
Of course
does?
I would.
You know, I met-
choose her all over again, but no one says that.
Hey, you know I met Springer one time.
Really?
Yeah, Jerry.
You're
Super
trying to
nice.
You're trying to get us views right now by mentioning Jerry.
He was, he just died.
Jerry. I grew up on that show.
He's never heard that in his entire life.
Right.
Can you imagine?
I grew up on that show. Okay. What was the other one down? Okay, what about Jerry Springer? Scroll down a sec.
I just met him one time at a baseball game.
I'm proud to be yours. Last night was fun.
These
That's
are
a
good
great
things. I think
idea.
everybody in
What's
the
one
room.
thing I can do for you today? Okay, what's one thing I can do for you today? Okay, if she texts back something, spicy, I don't know.
Well, we are
know
off
if
the
we can
record.
air it.
Hey,
I
I had to
just-
talk
I
about
just
the New
want
York Times. You have to talk about whatever comes up.
Believe me, it probably will not be spicy. It'll be like, yeah, how about put up the garbage idiot or something like that. Okay, so a couple different stay in your lane options that you put at the end. Parenting. Want to you give a great example about mother-in-laws and needing to make decisions about kids that they don't like. So a mother loves their son marries a girl. She's not a big fan of the girl. The other son says, if you keep bringing this one around, my family doesn't want to come on this vacation.
Yeah.
Great example. So you sat them down. The book opens with this story. So you sit
happens
them
all the
down.
time.
Yeah. What's mine? What's yours? What's theirs? So
No, it happens all the time. So you get a big family vacation, And yet one of the children marries somebody, a spouse that's a little bit more difficult. And suddenly the family vacation isn't nearly as fun as it used to be. And so traditionally the parents / grandparents who are paying for everything think they have no choice, that they have no control, not recognizing that they do have choices. And so one scenario, this is going on, and so I'm sitting down talking to the oldest generation, and I said, hey, you have some choices to make. And they're like, no, we don't. There's nothing we can do about this. I said, absolutely, don't invite him. And they're like, oh, hang on. I said, now that comes with consequences. Sure. Because if you don't invite her, that means your son's probably not going to show up, and the son doesn't come up, the grandkids probably won't be there. But that's a choice that you have. The rest of the kids could still have a great time, or you could have a conversation with them. That conversation could go well. It could maybe not go well. You have all these options of what you can actually do, but we tend to get so narrowed in that we feel helpless. That's where a lot of people are. By the time they reach conversation with us in the lobby or wherever it is, they feel helpless in their situation. Right. And the truth of the matter is we are rarely helpless. Another scenario, whenever it comes to adult children, which I think is actually one of the places of application this book works the best, is once your kids reach about 7th grade until forever, right? As you're raising these little adults now and as they get older. But I'm sitting with the family, and the mom talks about how she doesn't necessarily like the girlfriend, which is totally the girlfriend of the son, which is totally fine, right? But then it comes up that she has shared this information, and that the son is 30. And I'm like, what business is that of yours to, without request, now share your opinion? He gets to marry whoever he wants to marry. Now, if he asks your opinion, great. But if not, you have to now stay in your lane on this.
So what did these people do with the kid that they didn't want to bring them up to the vacation?
With the vacation, it ended up they had a conversation. That here's what happened in previous vacations. It was very uncomfortable. Nobody liked it.
Right. Nobody likes your wife.
They didn't quite put it that way.
That's what they're saying.
They thought it. But
that is what they're saying. That's what the person's going to hear.
But
that's what's difficult called about having the conversation. Nobody likes your wife. You should come up and not bring her.
It wasn't done in that way. It was much more of this idea of here's the behavior that was not acceptable.
Yes.
Now, if we would love for you to come back, but you can't have that behavior.
Right.
And so if that behavior happens again, we're not coming back anymore. But if you can say this behavior isn't going to happen, it was an anomaly, then come back. That conversation happened. It was tense. It was uncomfortable. That appeased the other kids to know that the parents were dealing with it, not just blowing it off. And then the vacation actually happened, and it was reasonably successful, right? Okay. Still a little tense, still a little uncomfortable, but they figured it out.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Has she texted about it?
No.
Okay.
Politics.
Yeah.
Another example is you say this can be applied to anything. Family, decision-making, parenting, and then one of the last examples you give is politics. So how would it be applied to politics? Coming full circle back around.
It can go a variety of ways. For one, I'm in charge and in control of my one vote, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all I have. And I don't know what y'all did in Canada, but here in America we get a vote.
We don't get to vote.
And so
it's just
is it
sit
just
there in our
whatever
houses
whatever
for
the
2
Queen
years
says?
Whatever the Queen says. That's
or the King now. I don't understand how that works.
This is international geopolitics for a guy from Arkansas. Yes, we asked the King what we shall do, and he tells us.
So I get my one vote.
Yes.
That's all I should feel responsible for. But you look at the last couple of elections of my lifetime, it really was the church is ultimately responsible for the outcome that we think is right.
Right.
And so here's the danger of that, is if we are ultimately responsible for the outcome, very easily people can begin to think, well, the end justify the means. So we can do whatever whatever means we need to get the outcome that we want, which then empowers us and it justifies us to completely ignore the Sermon on the Mount.
Sure.
I think the truth of the matter is politically, I think more Christians should run and more Christians should lose. I'm not sure you can win an election in this country without lying. We don't have a right to lie. So while everybody else would say twist your opponent's words, take whatever they meant, take it, kind of twist it off the record in some different way and use it for your own benefit, I can't bear false witness against this other person. Even though they're lying.
Your yes be yes and your no be no.
Even though they're lying about me, I can't lie back to them.
Right.
And so if you understand what you actually control, my vote, my candidacy, what other people do, that's up to them. God ultimately is in charge of the outcomes. He moves the hearts of kings, right? It simplifies, I think, the whole election process. And if you look back for the church over the last probably 40 years, but even specifically the last 10 to 12 years, if we would have just focused on that. In faith, I'm going to vote for who I think is right. I'm not going to judge anybody else. And then we're going to be about the work of the kingdom. I think the church would have been much more effective and have a much better reputation than what we do.
What's your final couple minutes here? What is your thinking? The last episode, the only other episode of Off the Record, was about ChatGPT, AI, deepfakes, technology, the progress of it. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think it's like any technology.
Like you've seen the recent stuff where AI has been used with people on the internet, where if they've spoken for any length of time on the internet, you can take the language. There was a 2-hour podcast that was produced that the person never even did. There was phone calls being made to parents saying, "I'm abducted, give me money, I'm a hostage." Anyway, sorry. Some of the dangers. What's your wisdom?
I think just practically every parent, every family is going to have code words.
Okay, Jordan is really excited. AI also produced a photo with the Pope wearing a big white puffy jacket.
Yes,
and it's not real. Obviously, everybody. I mean, not obviously. It looks good. It's not the most insane thing I've ever seen.
Have you done?
But that is fake.
Have you done your own AI photos?
I have. I didn't know that was a thing. Jordan, let's
Jordan,
pull up some Mark Clark through history.
Go to my
put me
Instagram.
In the Egyptian.
Go to my Instagram and you can find AI Kevin Thompson. So you submit actual pictures of yourself.
Oh.
It's Kevin_A_Thompson.
Okay.
Because it's a common name that I have. So I think, here's the thing. I think every family needs to have a code word that if you get called in what feels like an emergency,
right,
you have to be able to say, what's the code word?
Yes.
Because exactly what you're saying is happening.
Yeah, people can take, like as much as I'm talking online, people can take my words and call my kids at any moment and say, blah, 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 blah. And my kids will be like, Dad? Blah, blah. So it is a scary time to be.
And it always sounds like you're under distress anyway. So
one of the reviews at church, Scott Connor, one of our pastors, showed me the other day. It was his voice is so hoarse because he's always screaming. And that's actually very true. My voice
is it the Tourette's or is it years of smoking?
I don't know
what is the voice.
To be honest, I don't know. I got to figure it out though. I used to preach
there you
one.
Go, right
look at that one. Look at that.
There he is.
You're asking us to pull it up because you love this photo. You think this is the best you've ever looked. Look at that with the look. Oh my gosh! Are we even showing these?
This
Obviously,
is AI. Look, that's got John Mulaney.
You love that.
Look, that's John Mulaney right there.
007.
You know
my.
Why is the crew laughing at this moment?
Because look at it, bro. There you go. With those. Any final advice from Stay in Your Lane?
I want to know what you read it. You read it.
I loved it.
What's a takeaway from it?
Honestly, the takeaway from it. It sounds weird to say. I could have read the first 10 pages and been like, that's the takeaway.
Absolutely.
This gave me a tool for the rest of my life that I can apply to a million situations that goes, what is mine? What is theirs? What is God's? And I go, okay, I can't try to be God and I can't control what they think and I can't control this and I can't control this. I can influence, I can pray, I can hope, I can do whatever I need to do. And then, it's coming back to your point. It's Sermon on the Mount. It's, what creates worry and anxiety in your life? Don't you realize God takes care of the birds? God takes care of this. And they don't do all this fandangling around trying to sort of force it. They let life come to them. Yeah. And every single one of us needs to figure out a way to stay in our lane, because if we don't, we're going to be seen as controlling, judgmental, narrow-minded, a jerk, whatever. But if we're taking responsibility for our lives, not, as you said, projecting it onto other people and blaming, my story is a story where I'm born in a situation, broken home. I have doing drugs as a little kid. I have all the little, plots of the story where I could have ended up. Dad dies, I'm 15, mental illness stuff. I could have been one of the stats of just the kids out in the street, joining a gang, whatever. But I took responsibility for my life, and I didn't blame the circumstances only. And now, of course, there's environmental circumstances to all of us and where we end up in life, but took some responsibility, and that's what's mine. Yeah. Where it ends up going is God's, and in some ways, the world. But anyway, so that's how I took it. I thought it was
Yeah.
super great. And in regard to counseling other people, helping people with advice, even if you're not someone who goes, oh, this is about me, I need help staying in my lane, this book could actually make you go, oh, I'm going to be able to counsel other people about how to stay in their lane, even if it's not a problem for them. So that's
and there's a reason it's a small book. I mean, it is. So this is something Jenny actually greatly encouraged me to write. This is the first time she's actually encouraged me to write a book specifically. She said, Kevin, people need this concept. And so, but I said, Jenny, it's 6 words. What's mine, what's theirs, what's God's. It's 6 words.
Yes.
How can we make this into book form? And so finally she convinced me to write it. I wrote it. You read it. We both agreed it was too long. So I took 6 words, made it way too long. We cut it back. But here's the principle of the smallness of the book.
Yes.
I want a guy to be able to look at this and go, that's doable. Like it literally has pictures in it.
Yes,
like,
there are
I can do this.
pictures, yes.
So the idea is, so I flew in to this morning from OC. The idea is get on an hour-long plane flight, read this book, and by the end of it, not only do you understand the whole book, you now have a perspective that you can use for the rest of your life on every single decision.
That's great. Okay, Aaron, text me back. 2 words.
Okay.
Well, 2.5. You're sweet.
Oh,
No,
look at that.
You can't really.
All because of
but it's wonderful.
you sent one of the 10 texts that I told you to send. Imagine if over the
now our
next
marriage is
9
better.
days, what if in the next 9 days you sent the other 9? Where would that take you?
Again, that other one, the first one it's weird.
It's not weird.
What was it? Gonna do it
I
all
want- hey,
over again with you or
I
something?
want people in the YouTube comments to answer this. If you're,
I'd choose you all over again.
what is
Your
that?
spouse just came up to
is
you on a
that
Tuesday
weird?
and walked into the kitchen and went, honey, I was thinking.
I'd choose you all
I'd
over
choose
again.
you all over again. I
I think that's brilliant.
think my wife would go, "Bleh."
Really.
I'm kidding. It's a
It's
wonderful
excellent.
sentiment. Come on. It's a wonderful
It's-
sentiment. We all love
you know
your
what,
blog.
Mark?
Join it now. I am KevinAThompson.com. What's the name of it?
KevinAThompson.com, ChangeTheOdds.com. We got multiple things that are out there. Look at Silas whenever he was 3 feet tall.
Love it.
What was going on?
Okay, guys. Well,
Mark,
hopefully.
I would choose you all over again to be my boss.
Thank you.
I don't know if I'd choose to do this interview all over again because we talked about the New York Times article, which I had no plans on talking about. But here we are. We're trying to get ratings. We're off the record.
Okay, guys. Hopefully this stuff's helpful to you. Honestly, amazing book. Get it for yourself. Comment, share if this is helpful. Thank you, Kevin A. Thompson.
Thanks,
for being
Mark.
our guest today.